thank you very much for joining me in this session. So, yeah, I'm good. Yeah. So today I'm going to talk to you about IoT solutions using Azure IoT and Azure Functions. Very specifically, I'm going to talk to you about this in the context of a case study that we did with a company in South Florida, where I'm from. So I have a decent amount of slides, and I'm going to kind of walk you through kind of showing the architecture, some of the challenges we ran into about the company or whatnot, and then I'll actually show you the live working demo of the solution, but simulated. I don't have any of the actual IoT devices here, but I'll simulate it on my machine, assuming the internet and everything works for me, and then I'll walk you through the actual cloud solution. So the agenda, keep it pretty simple. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, what it is I do at Microsoft. We're going to talk about Costa Farms, the company that we did this case study with. We're going to talk about IoT and functions, the two main pieces that helped enable this solution for them and it made a big difference in their company. We're going to do a project walkthrough, like all the pieces of it, the demo, and then I'm going to provide you links to everything. So links to all the slides. All the actual code for this project is open source, so every bit of code that I demo here you can download and test for yourself, and some other great resources to other case studies that you might want to see. So a little bit about me. So I'm Joe. Like I said, I'm a technical evangelist for Microsoft. People always ask me, so what the heck is a technical evangelist? And there really is no standard definition. It's a funny title, but basically it's a fun job. I get to work on the newest technologies and build projects with customers on new products. So in this case, new versions of Azure IoT, new versions of Azure Functions, and kind of find the bugs in the product and prove that they're viable with the customer. So I'll go do proof of concepts and then write up a case study and publish that. And on the side, other part of my job is do a lot of community work and just build all sorts of fun projects on my own and then go demo them in the local community. Before joining Microsoft, I actually owned a web development agency for close to 13 years, so my background's web, but I definitely call myself a jack of all trades, master of none, because of all the different technologies I use. And then also I play in a heavy metal band for many, many years, so if anyone wants to talk to me about music, definitely come and talk to me about that. So I've been playing guitar my whole life, and I recently became a father, so I got to include a picture of the baby up there. So with that, I'll kind of just jump in. Oh, and if you guys want to follow me on Twitter and with questions and stuff, definitely do that. That's always the best way to get in touch with me, but there is my contact information. So I'm going to kind of dive in. So Costa Farms. So Costa Farms is a very large company in South Florida, where I'm from. So I'm from the United States, the southeast region, so specifically Miami, Florida. Very hot, very humid there. And there's a lot of farming industry and agriculture in South Florida. So Costa Farms, they are one of the largest companies down there. And they have nurseries for house plants, so like poinsettias, small trees or whatnot. So if you want to get plants for your garden or for your front yard or backyard, you go to these big box retailers. Like in the US we have, it's Home Depot, it's Walmart, it's Lowe's, and if you buy from any of these big box retailers, you're actually buying, they get all their plants from Costa Farms. So they produce millions and millions of plants. They have thousands and thousands of acres, and as they have up here, they've been around since 1961. So just to kind of give you an example of the scale, that's just like one of their nurseries. And the thing about Costa Farms, too, which is really cool, for a farming and this type of agriculture company, they're very technology forward. So they use all Microsoft technologies. They're a C# shop. You walk in, they have big screens, like this set up with Power BI dashboards showing output, all sorts of different stuff. And they basically one day attended one of our meetups from another evangelist of mine, centered around IoT, and came up to us and was like, hey, this sounds interesting. Could we use like IoT in our farming and our nurseries? And we're like, well, yeah, why not? What would you want to use it for? Well, we want to monitor things, specifically like the pH level or like temperature, humidity inside these nurseries, because if it's not right, obviously, if they lose even one row or one section, that's real money. And when you scale that up to when they have hundreds of facilities like this, if they're losing one or two in each facility, that's real money and it's real revenue that's lost. So they want to become more efficient, they want to be more agile, and they want to be able to respond to when things happen. So we're like, yeah, sure, let's do a case study together. And so we basically kind of worked out what the requirements were, and we did this fun project together. So, so that was kind of how it started. It was like they came to us and said, hey, can you help us build an IoT solution so we can know if any certain values are off, and we can send someone out there immediately to fix it before we lose a crop. And so an example here, like again, these are the poinsettias. This is another one of their nurseries to where, I mean, this is a very popular house plant in South Florida. You go anywhere in South Florida, you're going to see these house plants at pretty much every house. And when you go online and you read the case study, because everything I'm going to show you today is all published online. I'm going to show you the link or whatnot. You're going to read about poinsettias. You're going to read about houseplants. But I'm going to let you in on a little secret. That is actually not why they contacted us. They're one of the first companies in South Florida that they can legally grow marijuana, medical marijuana. So they actually called us to say, hey, we're growing medical marijuana, and the pH levels really affect the plants. And I'm like, this sounds like fun. So literally, that's why they called us. But you're not going to see that in the case study. But that's our little secret. Okay, so we know what we're at. When I say poinsettia, I really mean weed. So we know what we're talking about here. So the pain point for it was that, and this, all the rest really does apply. So they need to regulate these pH levels, and each strain of this plant needs a different pH level. Some needs to be at like a 6, some needs to be at 8 or whatnot. And the pH level alone is one of the highest. The pH level alone is what could really affect whether the plant grows in the amount of time they need it to grow, or just doesn't blossom or do what it needs to do. So, and to test it, so the way they're set up, and unfortunately I don't have pictures of any of this, I wasn't allowed to take pictures of it, but it's basically a huge room, probably about twice the size of this room, and they have rows set up of these huge pots, no pun intended, and they have a water flowing in, and it goes into each of the pots, and water flowing out. And so they need to test the water at the source, flowing out of the pots, and then finally the water at the end. And it was a manual process. A guy would have to come in, he has this little sensor, he puts it in there, and he goes to each one. And imagine if in one room we have 20 rows, and then they have 100 of those rooms. So just to even get through all the pH levels for the day, I mean, for all the plants, could take 1 or 2 days and multiple people doing it. So like, we need a way so that we can monitor these pH levels. If we see one of them's off, we can send someone out there right away and increase the water level, or increase or decrease the water level if the pH is too low. And so that's kind of how it started. So the solution that we kind of came up with was to use Azure, which is our cloud, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. So real quick, is anyone here currently using Microsoft Azure, using the cloud system? So a couple. Okay, great. So for those who don't know what it is, I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but basically Azure is Microsoft's cloud, and we have a bunch of services of which we'll kind of go into. But we used all these fancy terms and services up here. So basically we had a pH sensor wired up to a, I'm sorry, let me back up. All their nurseries, again, because they're a very technology-forward company, they already had Wi-Fi in all the nurseries. So that solved one big problem for us right away. So we basically had a pH sensor hooked up to a little, it's called an Adafruit Feather M0. I think it's an Arduino board. And it was a sensor taking a reading every second, sent it up to Azure IoT Hub. We processed it with Stream Analytics, did some stuff there, and then we used an Event Hub and Azure Functions to actually do the notifications through Twilio, which is a messaging API, and we archived all the data in SQL Azure so that they can view it later. So that's all the pieces we use. So I'm going to kind of dive in and talk a little bit about Azure, and specifically the pieces they used in Azure, and why the cloud's important, and also specifically IoT, and then we'll kind of get into the demo piece. So as I said before, Azure's our cloud platform. The 4 main things we always talk about in Azure are, it lets you focus on, your application innovation. So we handle the infrastructure and the scalability. You just focus on writing code and your business logic. You can, we have artificial intelligence offerings that let you, make smart decisions based on your data, which is what we're doing here. Very open and flexible, meaning you don't have to write in .NET. In this case, I can demo it in Node.js or C#, which is great. So any language you want to build in, you can use it. And a big thing for them was security. So we have every security compliance there is, all that type of stuff. So I always bring that up. So brief history on cloud. So in the olden days, I don't know, pre-cloud, so maybe, 10, 12 years ago, you had on-premise servers. So you had, if you wanted to do anything, whether it was a web server or something to receive these IoT messages, you had to stand up your own servers or put them in a data center, and you had all the stuff in purple here you were responsible for. So the networking, storage, virtualization, anything you were doing, you were responsible for, all the way up through your application. Then virtualization came around, and we had infrastructure as a service, so IaaS. And so companies were doing this locally on their own machines, to where they were taking their own machines and virtualizing the hardware and making virtual machines. But again, even if you used a cloud provider like Azure, like AWS, or like Google, you still had to manage the operating system, so security updates, patches, all that type of stuff. It was a step forward, but still there was a lot to manage. So then we had platform as a service, and that's what we're going to talk about today, to where everything in green we're hosting and we're maintaining. You don't have to worry about patches, security, scalability, any of that. You just write code, you send data, the services should be able to take care of it for you and scale. And then this way, you don't, I want to get my problem solved. I don't want to manage a bunch of servers. So that's the solution and specifically with Costa, they have an IT staff, but they're already stretched thin. They don't have someone that could sit there and stand up a bunch of stuff to handle this. So another big thing for them too is they eventually want to, if this is a good enough solution, they want to then scale this out and possibly sell it to other farms and nurseries around the world. So we have, I think, the largest footprint. It's bigger than Google and AWS combined. We're in 38 regions. So if they want to sell this to a company in Europe, they can literally redeploy the same solution to someone in Europe, and they're going to get great performance, which is awesome. And then I'll skip over this. We have a whole series of services. We're only going to be talking about that little box there, analytics and IoT. And then I just put this in people always ask specifically, are you guys PCI compliant? Do you have this? These are all the certifications. Governments use us and all that. So that was a big thing. So I'm going to set the stage even for IoT now, just to kind of get us all on the same page. That kind of takes us to the next thing. So there is no standard definition of IoT that's out there. I know it's Internet of Things, but basically what we consider it, and what a lot of people consider it, is you have a thing. So in this case, a sensor. It could be my phone. It could be a smartwatch that has some type of connectivity, and it's sending some type of data. So in the case of a smartwatch, it could be sending exercise and health information or whatnot, sending it up to the cloud where it's stored, and then you're analyzing that data and doing something with it, and then taking action. So again, to apply this to what we did, we have a pH sensor connected, sending up readings up to the internet. We're analyzing it in the cloud, and then we're taking action by physically sending someone out there if there's an issue. Or even before that, we're taking action by sending an alert to the phone to even let them know. So some real-world examples of IoT use cases. I mean, there are tons out there, so I'll touch on a few. So I always talk about connected cows, because that was one of the first case studies that was published in 2015, to where farmers use this to help increase milk production and all sorts of stuff. You just do a search for it, connected cows, Microsoft, and a great case study comes up. It's used big time in aviation with aircraft. So if any of you flew in today, like we did, it's a good chance the flight you were on had Rolls-Royce engines. It's either that usually or GE engines. They both use IoT Suite, and basically they're constantly monitoring the health of thousands of different parts in the engines, and they do this for preventative maintenance. So the example that you can find online, if you search for that as well, is they basically see that this fuel pump is running, I think, 100 or 150 degrees hotter than it should. So rather than wait for it to fail when it's mid-flight, which is a maintenance, a catastrophe, but also it puts, people at risk just in case, they actually pull that engine out of service ahead of time, replace that pump, and put it back into service. So that equates into real dollars. And again, that's just one example. Trucking industry uses it. Elevator industry is a big one. I think it's ThyssenKrupp. I don't know how to pronounce it, but they use it in all their elevators for preventive maintenance and whatnot. So you could literally apply IoT to any solution, and racing. So NASCAR uses it as well, which is great. So just also to let me talk about the slides. I hate making slides, so I pull these all from our sales teams because they look pretty. I know they look a little salesy, but I don't do the slides, but they help me on my talking points. So in the past, so I'm talking 2-3 years ago, if you wanted to set up an IoT project, it was tough. And I know because I tried, and there wasn't infrastructure, there wasn't services to kind of get you out the door. So the issues you ran into, long project timelines, so where if I wanted to do something similar, that what I'm going to demo here at Costa Farms, it could be a month, which is setting stuff up, securing hardware, building my own custom APIs, my storage solution or whatnot, and it takes forever. Hard to analyze, all that data that's coming in. Current infrastructure. So if I had, existing systems in place I wanted to monitor, very hard to do, and it was just overall difficult to get the whole solution up and running. So that's where Azure IoT Suite comes in. It's really just to make your lives easier. So enable fast solution development, facilitate new insights, provide connectivity to both existing and new devices. So what we mean there is, so if you have older devices, we probably have an SDK for it. And newer devices, we have SDKs for all of those, which make things easier, to where you create an object, you send, and that's it. It's a couple lines of code. And then connect to existing business systems, which is important. So if you have existing systems that are, have data that you need to process or whatnot, Azure IoT Suite can help you there. So this is a typical architecture, and it's similar to what we're going to do here. I'm going to show you a very specific architecture of how an Azure IoT solution, if you were to deploy it, might work. So you have your actual device, or in this case, I'm going to do a C# and a Node.js simulator to demonstrate. It sends the data, and it's really just a JSON object. So it's an object with whatever data I want, schema agnostic, so however you want it, goes into IoT Hub, okay? And then we can then take all that data, process it in Stream Analytics. And what Stream Analytics does, it's you set up basically inputs and outputs in Stream Analytics, and then you query one to the other, and you can either transform data or you can take action. So in this case, we can analyze it, take specific data, put it into storage, take specific data, put it into event hubs, or do machine learning on it. And then we could surface that data different ways. So we can go to a web app, store it or archive it in DocumentDB, web jobs, and then even take action with logic apps or backend processes. So there's a million different things you can do. The hardest part usually is just getting the data into IoT Hub and Stream Analytics, and then figuring out, okay, what do I want to do with it? And I'm going to show you great examples, because we do a couple things in the demo that I'm going to do. I think this slide's actually out of order, but one thing I talked about earlier, kind of in summary with IoT Hub, all different types of devices, whatever language you want to build in, C, Node.js, Java, .NET, Python, any operating system. We use a couple different protocols, which actually I ran into an issue here because the Wi-Fi here locks down a certain protocol that we're using, so I kind of had to change it up. And it plugs into a lot of existing solutions if you have an existing infrastructure. And again, the SDKs are awesome, make your life easier. So you just import a couple lines of code, do what you need to do, and then go from there. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about what we actually built in the engagement. So as I said, they came to one of our meetups, talked to us. Actually, Manny, who's right there in the center, and then David, who's also an evangelist, and then Blaine, who's an evangelist. They worked on the project with me. And they said, we want to build this solution. We need to be notified. So it's like, okay, let's reserve a couple days at your office. Let's have like a little mini hack fest. So before we did the hack fest, David, Blaine, and myself got together and kind of just did a very, very rudimentary proof of concept to make sure even our idea was good to send data from one to the other. And we did that so that when we got there, we kind of looked like we knew what we were doing, and it worked, which was great. But when we got there, we presented to them, and they said, okay, this is mostly good, but we want to extend it. And they had a lot of great ideas. For instance, we don't want to just get notification. We want to archive every piece of data that comes in, maybe to surface it up to a mobile app later. I'm like, oh, that's great. And we want to integrate with Power BI. Okay, that's another great idea. And then eventually, we'd love it to where we can text back on the phone, and maybe something could happen to adjust those pH levels, and we don't have to send someone out. And like, those are all great ideas. So the infrastructure we put in place was reflective of all their goals and their changes. So this is what we actually put into place. And it's very, very similar to what I said before. It's actually a little bit simpler. So we have the pH probe hooked up to the Adafruit Feather M0 Wi-Fi Arduino. It's connected to the Wi-Fi network. Every second, it takes the pH level. And actually, I'm sorry, I missed one thing here. So that's the actual device, and again, it was a proof of concept. So the real device that they're going to eventually do, they 3D printed a box, nicer wires, but that's the pH sensor on the left into the board, and the Arduino's that little tiny board on the bottom right there. I forgot about that. So that basically every second sends a message up to IoT Hub. And all that message is, again, is a JSON object. And in there, I think we have a device ID, device type, so in this case, pH. We have a minimum value, a maximum value, and then a current value. and then what row ID, what nursery, and some other identifying information. And I'm going to go into why we did that schema a little bit later. That data goes into IoT Hub, and then every time a message is received, it goes into Stream Analytics. And then basically what we're doing is we're taking a copy of every single message, and we're dropping it into SQL database. And they're using that later to surface into Power BI, so they can view a full historical data of all their sensors. And then we have a second Stream Analytics query that's running that's basically saying, select my reading where the value is either less than the minimum value or greater than the maximum value, meaning it's outside of that range. That means there's something wrong. So if the pH level should be between, let's say, 4 and 6 on this plant, and the pH level is reading a 7, I need you to take that reading and pop it into this event hub, this separate bucket. And so we have that event hub that sits there that only receives stuff that there's issues with. And then what we have is called an Azure function, which is a serverless function, which I have another talk later today strictly on serverless, so I'll talk just a little bit about that today. And it's just monitoring that event hub. And it only fires when there's a message in there. So all day it's reading, and now a message comes in to where the pH level is higher than it should be or lower than it should be. The Azure function sees that in the event hub, picks up that message, deserializes it, and then we send it to the Twilio API. Does anyone know what Twilio is or use Twilio? So great. So yeah, Twilio is just a simple API service that you use to send and receive text messages. Really simple to use, and it's great. So we send the message to Twilio API, and then I get an alert on my phone, which I should be able to demo. And now what's not in the diagram, because we didn't get a chance to finish it, we only basically worked with them for 2 days, was the other piece I talked about. We had it to where, in addition, that if it came back and said, nursery 1, row 7, plant 6, pH is reading 7, and the threshold is between 1 and 6 or whatnot, I could actually text it back and say, add water. And it would actually go back to Twilio. Twilio would hit another Azure Function API, which would then put a message back into Event Hub or into IoT Hub, which would go down to the device. So that's an important distinction to where with IoT Hub, it's two-way. With just regular Event Hubs, you can only send messages from a device up to the cloud. With IoT Hub, you can communicate back and forth. We didn't finish that, but it's just I wanted to bring that up because I do have the sample code in the repository, and it's something that a lot of people have actually asked about. So in the future, we will do that to where they can literally just control the water through a text message. So any questions so far about the architecture, about IoT Hub, before I kind of jump in and attempt to do a demo? Yes? No, we do not. So the question was, do we validate the data at the IoT Hub level? We do not. In this case, it was a proof of concept. So there were a couple things that I would say are not best practices. But really, we're just sending the data at IoT Hub, and we know what the schema is. And like, so one example that we get asked about with the data that we're going in, you know, is it good to include the minimum thresholds and the maximum with the data you're sending up? Probably not, but to get it running quickly, this way allowed us that it didn't have to be a pH sensor. We literally could replicate this exact same solution if we wanted temperature, lighting, humidity, and all we would have to do is replace out the sensor and just put sensor type, whatever, temperature, min 10, max 50, or whatever you want to do, and no code would have to be changed, which is great. So you'll see, so there are a couple things that, you know, you should normally validate the data before sending it, and then, because you can't really validate it at the IoT Hub level. It's going to take whatever you send to it. So, okay, so what I'll do is I'm going to actually walk you through first the Azure side of things. I'm going to show you the portal, all the different services that are set up inside the portal, what it actually looks like, and then I'll show you the C# version and then the Node.js version, and I'm going to cross my fingers. I have to connect to my actual phone as a hotspot to get the demo to work, but I'll simulate an actual device sending messages, and we'll kind of watch it go through the whole process. So let me get out of here. Okay, great. I'm on duplicate, and so oh, that's neat. Just decided to change colors. Let me go full screen here. So this is Azure. So for those who have used Azure before, actually, let me do this, yeah. Basically, this is our dashboard and our control panel. Really simple to use. You log in, you have what are called resource groups, which are very important. So resource groups let you group together common things that are working. So in this case, I have other demos I'm doing. I put in Code Europe demos, and I set them up in a European region. So when I leave here, if I have 25 things that are set up, I don't have to go and find them. I could just delete that group, and it deletes everything associated with it. In addition, at the end of each month, I could see what each resource group is charging me. I have the health. So as I was saying, Azure is available in many regions around the world. So if there's an issue, it's going to show up here. The current time, which back home, it's actually 4:44 a.m. And then, and you can customize this, do whatever you want, which is great. And then really, any new services I want to create, we try to make it as simple as possible. So in this case, if I wanted to make a new IoT solution, I could just literally type IoT, it searches, and then we have different solutions that are available. Or I could just go down to Internet of Things, IoT Hub, Event Hub, anything that I want to do, and I just create it, so I'll just click it just to show you. I enter a couple values, I hit create, and then I'm literally, at the end when this is done, we actually give you a sample project to download, sample code, so you could literally be up and running in a few minutes, which is great. And it's all relatively quick. One thing to note too, we have a free tier that lets you send up to 8,000 messages a day. So if you did want to test this out and you don't want to spend anything, you can do that. And my demo is actually running on the free tier. So this is my resource group for the Costa Farms demo. And let me see if I can make it just a little bit larger. Okay. Sorry, let me just do one more thing. Let me make this full screen, and I'll do it that way. Oh, no, you can't do it that way. Sorry. Okay. So in my Costa Farms resource group, I have my IoT Hub that we talked about. We have the Event Hub that's used later for that the alerts get dropped into. We are using SQL in this case just to surface up the data for Power BI. We have the Azure function, which again, that's the serverless that just is monitoring that Event Hub. We just have a general storage account that we need, and then we have the Stream Analytics. So I'll just go through each one briefly and then see if we can kind of dive into the demo stuff. So the IoT Hub, when you go into it, pretty straightforward. So you see those are the two test messages I sent just a few minutes ago. In this case, I can send up to 8,000 messages a month. On the free tier, you can do as many devices. So IoT Hub is very secure as well. So for each device that you're sending and receiving messages from, you have to set up a specific device ID and its own device key. So it's not like if you have this out there, any device can just start hitting it and using up your bandwidth or your quota. So you have to securely set up each device. So let me just show you where that is at. Oh yeah, Device Explorer. So in this case, I have Code Europe, which is the test, and just the actual sensor we're using here is pH sensor, and these are just other demos of devices that I've done here. Okay, and then the next level up, I think it's not very expensive, it's a few dollars a month, so you go from 8,000 messages up to 400,000 messages. So this is made for very large scale. We have companies sending millions and millions of messages a day into IoT Hub, and it handles it just fine, which is great. You can also deploy it to different regions. So then, after IoT Hub, later on we have the Event Hub, which I told you is just the bucket that we hold the events. So this is where if something is not what it should be, it goes into this Event Hub, and so we literally just have one Event Hub down here called Alerts. That's it, and it's just sitting there. And in this case, you see I have 1 or 2 messages that I sent this morning when I was testing it. Okay, so the Stream Analytics, this is probably the most complicated part of it. So as I said, the data goes into IoT Hub. So you'll see that here on the left side. That's our input that we set up with Stream Analytics. So in Stream Analytics, you set up inputs, outputs, and then you query them in between. And then we have 2 actual outputs. We have the SQL database, which I didn't show you, but it's a standard SQL database with the columns in it. And then we have the alerts that I showed you. And then if I go into the query, it's standard SQL that you've seen. So basically, I'm selecting all my columns from or into Costa SQL, which is one of my outputs, from Costa IoT Hub, which is my input. So that's basically anything that comes in, I'm taking a copy, putting it in SQL. And then secondly, I'm saying select all my columns into alerts, which is a separate output from the same input where, and here's the current value is less than min value or the current value is greater than max value. So this will only take things or messages that are outside of that threshold and put them in there. So and I just thought of one more thing I have to change in order to demo this. So I'll show you the SQL Server. So, and again, this is running SQL Server as a service. So again, you don't have to worry about configuring. You just hit New SQL Server, select the performance level. You put in a name, a password, and it does everything for you. Again, the cloud lets you focus on building stuff, not configuring. So I actually have to add this IP address to the firewall to demo because by default it locks down the outside world. So let me save that because I'm going to demo, show you how the stuff going into the database. Okay, I'll leave that loading in the background. And then let me see what else. Okay, and then we have the final piece after the stream analytics is we have the actual function. So I am speaking later today, I think at 2:10, where I'm going to do a deep dive into Azure Functions, but a very short summary of it is what serverless is. It's code that only runs and you're only charged for when a condition is met or it's triggered. So in this case, that condition is that a record gets added to the Event Hub. So that code is sitting there, not costing me a thing, not running, but when a message gets added to the Event Hub, it knows it and it fires off this code. So in this case, I have two versions in C# and then in Node. So it takes the message, deserializes it, I create a custom message, and then I authenticate against Twilio, and I send the message. That's it. And then it just only runs each time. And then the same thing in Node.js. And then I have all the code here, just lots of comments. It's really only 3 lines of code. So that's kind of the solution as a whole. And then we're going to try to demo this. So let me actually log into the database. Any more questions while I'm, setting this up? Any questions? Yes. Great question. So the question is, we know when the events go in, but when do they get deleted? So when using, oh wow, I guess they only have port 80 open, outgoing. So with Event Hub, so automatically with, let's say, functions, when the function reads it, it's picking up that message. If that function completes properly, that message is removed. So it's gone. So once it's in there, it's gone. It's good to go. So, and I talk about that in my other talk later as well. So basically, if it fails, it puts it into a separate queue, but it's only going to run once. You're only going to get one alert, which is great. So what I have to do here real quick, actually, is I have to set up the hotspot on my phone. It takes just 2 seconds. Because the network here doesn't allow other ports outgoing, it seems, besides like HTTP and HTTPS. And in order for the demo to work, and like on this one, I need port 1433 for SQL. Okay. It's the fun part, see if actual demos work. Okay, so I'm connected. Great. So let me go back here. Let me add down that IP address. Awesome. Show firewall settings. Add client IP. Save. Okay, so let's try this one more time. Connect database engine. IP address is not allowed. Let's try this one more time. What was that IP address? I don't know why it's not. Give me 1 second. This is the fun of live demos. 107.92.60.10. Should auto detect it. I don't know why it's not doing it. Code Europe. Save. And if this one doesn't work, it's okay. We don't have to show the SQL database. Okay, so let me try it one more time. See, it's really secure. I told you. Okay, so we're in now. So all I'm going to really show you here is that I'm going to delete the database. I want to show each piece that it's actually working. When I do a live demo, I want to make sure that each piece is actually. So it might run a little slow because, again, it's just running off my cell phone, and the reception isn't the greatest, it seems. Okay, so let me go to databases, and let me do new query. And then Come on. There we go. And then so I'm going to do select star. Well, when it lets me, I'm going to do that. Is anyone here currently using Azure IoT Hub or Azure IoT Suite at all? No? Okay, cool. There we go. Select star from sensor reading. Let me query that. Okay, so I have from the demo I did on Tuesday, 24 rows. Let me just do delete from sensor reading. And so you see I just basically have the sensor reading ID, which is the primary key, and I'm just hard coding values. A nursery ID, a row ID, the sensor ID, the strain. So with marijuana, there's many different strains. So we did it so they can put what strain and do different pH levels, which is really cool, and then the dates that it was created. So I'm going to delete from sensor reading. Okay, and we should have nothing in there now. Okay. So real quick question. So I'll demo both, but how many, are there any C# developers in here? Okay, great. And then what about Node.js? Oh, wow, mostly C#. Okay, great. So I'm a C# guy, but I will demo both, but I'll start with the C# version, because that's what I originally built. So this is the simulator. So normally what you would do is you would have a device. So it could be, like I said, that Arduino or a Raspberry Pi, and we have SDKs for all of them, where literally, or in the case of the Raspberry Pi, you could actually install Windows 10 IoT Core on it, and you could probably deploy this exact same application and just read the sensor instead of hard code it. And then you literally just, so I set up the URL, so the URI to my IoT Hub, the device key, and then you'll see here, I'm just passing in the let me make this a little larger, sorry. I'm just passing in the ID of the item or the device and the key, and then I have a method called send device to cloud message async, and this is literally built off in our documentation, the exact same demo we have in there, and I just modified it slightly. So all this code is available online, and I'm basically declaring a new random number, and then I have a class called sensor reading, which is what I showed you in the database. So that's down here. It's a very basic class, and I'm hard coding all the values that we talked about there, and then I'm just randomly selecting a pH value. And then I'm serializing the object, so that's JSON, and then I'm sending it as a string, and I send it to the IoT Hub, and that's it, and that kicks everything off, and then I'm doing that every 3 seconds so I could demo it. So what I'll do is I will turn the sound on my phone, and I actually, maybe I could do the camera too, show you that it's working. We're going to get fancy here. Nope, we don't want to see me. Oh, there it is. Whoever's sitting in the front there. Okay, great. So there's my phone. And then if I go ahead and then let me, so here's a simulated device, and hopefully it connects. What Wi-Fi are we on? Yeah, so it's connecting, and that's the object we're sending in. You see it's just a JSON object every 3 seconds. So I switch over to the camera. So here we go. That one came up at 0.2. We should start seeing in a second. Hopefully my wife doesn't text me anything funny. There we go. So there's the message come in, sent from Twilio, alert. And so they come in real time. And so there they are. There's the actual alert. So the whole thing, you see it happens almost instantly, which is great. So, and the whole solution itself, it's really applicable to anything. So if I go now, let me stop this. And I turned the sound off. That's funny. I meant to turn it on. Okay, let me stop this guy. Okay, so again, that was a C# version. It went all the way, and there's a little bit of a delay. So it could be anywhere from a couple seconds to a minute. It could be the Twilio API. But the message just basically reads, alert nursery 1 row 222 strain Arduino sensor is reading 7.2, which is pretty cool. So, and you can customize that however you want. So it literally went through that whole process instantly. And if I go back now, just to show you in the IoT Hub, we should. This lags a little bit behind, but we should start to see the messages. Okay, so in a second, that message will go up to like 10 or 15, and it gives you a nice graph of the messages and the activity. And then in the SQL database, if I now select star from sensor reading, those are all the messages that we just sent and that came in, which is great. So they're archived, which is really, really neat. So I'll show you the exact same thing now as a Node.js version, and the code's very similar and even easier. So I'm in VS Code now, and there's just one file here. So I basically have two packages I have to install, Azure IoT Device, MQTT, that's the protocol we're using. And then I create a message, I set up my environment variables, again, the same three things, the host, the device key, and the device ID. I'm creating a connection string, and then I just have a log, and then I have a simple callback, and then right there, I'm putting together the JSON object, exact same thing. I'm just saying Node.js, so I know it's coming from Node.js, and then I'm sending it and I log it. So if I go now to my console, make that much larger, and I say, what is it, node index.js. Cross our fingers. So we're connected, and then this one every second should, same thing. So in this case, it's saying the message is queued, message is queued, message is queued, and then it kicks off that whole process. And then there we go. The messages, only the messages that are outside of that threshold are coming in. So a fully working solution. Now, how do I stop this? There we go. Pretty cool, right? Okay, so let me now show you a couple more things inside the portal, and then kind of wrap up with where you can find all this code, the information, and then also resource links. So yeah, so let me go back to the portal. So if I go now to, let me go into Stream Analytics. So it should, again, there's a little bit of a lag, but it shows you. So here are the events that are coming in, and it shows you. So input events 24, output events 20, and whatnot. And it shows you, so you could see, a nice graph of what's going on. Same thing with the Event Hub. Let me see here. Let me go here, the Event Hub. We should be able to see the activity that's going on. So there we go. We're starting to see the activity. And then again, the IoT Hub itself lags a little bit behind. So all of this, well, first of all, my slide deck, I'll provide a link at the end that you can download all of this, all of links or whatnot. But every single thing I showed you is in my GitHub page. I'm github/joescars, and the project's Costa IoT Sensor project. But inside of here, what you'll see is, I did not mean to click that. Let me zoom in. So we have the actual code we used to send the message from the Arduino up to IoT Hub. Now, just to tell you about this, I would not do it this way, but it's a good example. So at the time, we didn't know that there was actual SDK that you can use on the Arduino. So we sent it through just through REST calls. So that's another great thing about IoT Hub, is that you can securely, if we don't have an SDK for it, which is rare, you can just send an HTTP call and authenticate with the device ID and the device key. So that's what we did here. And all that code is here, where we put it together, and then we authorize it, and we send the message every 10 seconds, in this case, on the other Arduino. Then we have the message simulator that I showed you in C#, the message simulator in Node.js, the function in C#, the function in Node.js, and then what I didn't show you was the web responder app. So we did have it to a point where I could actually text it back and say add water, and it will respond back to me saying, okay, adding water. And it's a simple MVC app, which now I'd actually do with an Azure function. Then we have the diagram and whatnot, and then everything I just demoed in the actual PowerPoint, this is the actual case study that's online. And of course, it's going to mention poinsettias and plants, not what we talked about. But it has all the same pictures, a little bit more information, the solution, the actual wiring diagram if you do want to actually test out something similar. And then we actually have a video walking through the solution. And there's a beautiful video in my presentation to where we actually had a film crew come out, and then we interviewed Costa and did a nice actual real case study. It's like a 3-minute video, which is really nice. So that's that. And then there's other case studies too, because that's, as evangelists, what we do is if you go up here, you click on that, you'll see we have hundreds and hundreds of case studies on all different types of technologies. So with that, let me go back to I think we're making good time. So again, all the links. So Azure Functions, I briefly touched on it, but I'm talking at, if you are interested, let's see the schedule here. 2:10? No. Here we are, 2:10 in room Palo Alto. I'm going to be talking on Azure Functions, so I'm really going to do a deep dive into what they are, why they're really useful, how they can save you a ton of money. They saved me a lot of money and saved a few of our partners a lot of money. And again, you can use all sorts of different languages, which is really neat. So I will open it up for questions. I think we have about 10 minutes left. So there's my contact information. Again, feel free to email me. I'm terrible at email, but I'm somewhat better at Twitter. All my slides are up there on slideshare.net/J.Raio. I didn't include a link to my GitHub, but it's just GitHub/JoeScars, the same thing as on Twitter. I have lots and lots of demos up there, and every demo I do, I put up there. So questions?